course that happens. Hello, friends. Welcome to our weekly foray into the topic of politics and current events. I'll be your host for the evening, Watty Watts. That's Watford Reynolds Watts. Watford R. Watts. The show is called Eyes to See, Vision Beyond Narrative. And I'm just going to jump right into my normal essay. It's kind of a continuation of our last one, which I thought was good. This is essay 7. Reality is not interested in your narrative. You see how those two things tie together? And listen as we go through the paper. Eyes to See, that's the show. We're trying to gain or develop or refresh eyes so we can see. See what? Well, truth. Vision beyond narrative. What's narrative? Narrative is just bullshit stories and lies that you tell yourself. Well, my truth is this, and you just need to live your truth. Okay, but that doesn't hold water because it doesn't correspond with reality. Again, Essay 7, reality is not interested in your narrative. Let's begin. There's a moment when reality stops making suggestions. At first, it's usually polite. It gives a man a small warning. His body gets heavier. His temper shortens. His bills begin to stack up. His marriage becomes quieter. His children stop coming to him with questions. His house starts showing his neglect, and his work remains unfinished. His promises begin to sound familiar because he has made them before, and the people who love him have learned to not believe them. Ouch. None of this arrives with trumpets. Reality rarely enters the room like a revolutionary. More often, it taps on the glass. It leaves evidence. It places small, ordinary witnesses all around a man's life and waits to see whether he will tell the truth about them. But a man trained by narrative does not know what to do with the evidence that accuses him. He knows what to do with the evidence that accuses his enemies. He can see hypocrisy in others with perfect vision. He can detect corruption in institutions, dishonesty in politicians, cowardice in commentators, manipulation in media, and rot in every system that does not flatter his existing suspicions. He can follow the incentives. He can identify the language games. He can smell propaganda when it comes wearing the wrong team's colors. He is not without intelligence. He may even be right about most things. But when reality touches his own life, suddenly his eyesight becomes clouded. He can't see clearly himself, right? The body is not warning him. It's just getting older. The bank account is not telling him something. It's just the slow economy. The marriage is not revealing neglect. His wife is just difficult. The children are not reflecting his impatience. Kids are just soft now. The calendar is not exposing his priorities. He has simply just been too busy. The unfinished work is not accusing him. He has merely been waiting for the right time. The phone is not disciplining his attention. We'll just say stealing, we'll say. The phone is not stealing his attention. He is just staying informed. And so reality speaks, but narrative answers. The stories you tell yourself, see? That is the conflict underneath almost every serious question in public life. Not merely left against right, not merely elite against the ordinary people, not merely truth against lies in some abstract sense. Underneath all that is a much older conflict: reality against narrative. See, reality is what it is. Remember my other paper. Let me say that again. Reality is what is, that which is, also known as truth. The narrative is a story we tell about what is. A good narrative can illuminate reality. It can give order to experience. It can help us see connections we would otherwise miss. Human beings need stories because human beings do not live as calculators. We live by meaning, memory, imagination, inheritance, and hope. A truthful story can strengthen the soul, but a false narrative does something else. It does not illuminate reality. It shields us from it. It arranges events in such a way that we never have to occupy the guilty seat. It hires language on behalf of appetite. It turns consequences into persecution. Correction is cruelty. Discomfort is injustice. And ordinary responsibility into someone else's failure. That is why the title of this essay matters. Reality is not interested in your narrative. The soil does not care about your theory of gardening. The engine does not care how persuasive your explanation sounds. The scoreboard does not care about your potential. The bank does not care that your intentions were good. The child does not care that you meant to be present. The scale does not care about your preferred identity. And the calendar does not care what you claim to value. Reality is wonderfully rude. It keeps refusing to flatter us. In the last essay, we talked about the fact that a person cannot see clearly while living falsely. We looked at the uncomfortable truth that deception does not only come from the outside, it finds a place inside us. It finds the appetite that wants comfort. It finds the resentment that wants a villain. It finds the laziness that wants a noble excuse. It finds the fear that wants to call cowardice wisdom. But there is another step after that diagnosis. If deception works because we make room for it, then truth requires that we become the kind of people who can be corrected by reality before catastrophe becomes necessary. That is not glamorous work. It does not feel heroic. It rarely produces applause. It begins in places too ordinary to impress anyone. It begins when a man looks at the actual evidence of his life and stops arguing with it. There is a certain kind of man who cannot do this. He cannot be corrected. That may be the most dangerous condition a person can reach. Not ignorance. Ignorance can still learn. Not error. Error can be revised. Not even deception. Deceived man may still wake up if reality gets through to him. But the uncorrectable man is different. He has built a legal defense around his own soul. Every fact has to pass through his courtroom, and the verdict has already been written. If you correct him, you are attacking him. If consequences arrive, he is being treated unfairly. If someone tells him the truth, they lack compassion. If his plan fails, someone else sabotaged him. If his habits produce predictable outcomes, the outcomes are mysterious. If his wife names what is obvious, she is nagging. If his children withdraw, well, they're just ungrateful. If his body breaks down, life is not fair. If his finances collapse, the system is rigged. If his work remains mediocre, well, it's because people failed to appreciate him. There may be pieces of truth in some of those complaints. That is what makes this condition so slippery. The world is not innocent. Systems do not exploit. People do lie. Systems do not. Did I say do not? The world is not innocent. Systems do exploit. People do lie. Economies do squeeze. Institutions do protect themselves. Families do wound one another. There are real injustices, real betrayals, real limitations, and real burdens that fall unevenly across human life. But the uncorrectable man uses the partial truth of those realities to avoid the particular truth about himself. That is where narrative becomes dangerous. A false narrative does not usually begin as a total lie. Total lies are too easily recognizable. The most useful narratives contain enough truth to feel honest and enough distortion to protect the self. They're not designed to explain reality. They are designed to preserve innocence. This is why excuses are private propaganda. Propaganda is not only something produced by governments, corporations, parties, or media systems. Propaganda is a language arranged to manage perception in service of power. Let me say that one again. You can clip that. Propaganda is language arranged to manage perception in service of power. And the smallest government in the world is the self trying to rule over its own conscience. Every excuse is a press release from the regime of appetite. I did not lie. I was trying to avoid unnecessary conflict. I was not lazy. I was overwhelmed. I was not cowardly. I was being strategic. I was not resentful. I was demanding justice. I was not addicted. I was decompressing. I was not neglectful. I was busy providing. I was not harsh. I was just telling the truth. I was not irresponsible. I was just under pressure. I was not proud. I was standing firm. Some of those explanations may occasionally be true, but if they always protect the same desire, defend the same weakness, excuse the same pattern, and leave the same damage behind, then they are not explanations, they are propaganda. And a man who believes his own propaganda becomes easy to manipulate by the propaganda of others. Write that one down too, boys. A man who believes his own bullshit becomes easy to manipulate by the bullshit of others. Cheers. This is the bridge between the private life and the public world. It is fashionable to talk about propaganda as though it descends upon innocent people from above, like poison sprayed over a helpless field. There is truth in that. Power does try to shape perception. Institutions do manufacture consent. Political movements do manipulate emotion. Media systems do train attention towards certain conclusions and away from others. But propaganda does not work on a soul that has no appetite for it. It works because it meets something already active inside of us. It meets fear and gives it a villain. It meets envy and calls it justice. Starting to see the pattern here. It meets pride and calls it discernment. It meets cowardice and calls it prudence. It meets lust and calls it liberation. It meets laziness and calls it compassion. It meets tribal hatred and calls it moral clarity. The public lie succeeds because it resembles the private lie closely enough to be familiar. That is a brutal thought, but it is necessary. A man who constantly excuses himself will eventually prefer a politics that excuses him. A people who refuse correction in private will eventually demand leaders who help them deny consequences in public. A society that cannot bear reality at the level of the household will not suddenly become honest at the level of state. This is why public life has become so childish. We want outcomes without causes. We want rights without responsibility. We want freedom without self-command. We want compassion without judgment. We want justice, but without truth. We want prosperity without discipline. We want safety without courage. We want healing without confession. See the pattern here? We want peace without repentance. We want strong communities built out of weak individuals and truthful institutions built out of dishonest citizens. That cannot work. Reality does not negotiate with slogans. You can pass laws against gravity in your imagination, but the fall will still break your bones. You can rename debt, but the interest keeps counting. The juice keeps flowing. You can call disorder liberation, but the children still inherit the wreckage. You can call resentment justice, but it will still rot the one who carries it. You can call cowardice sensitivity, but the truth you avoided will still come due. The great sickness of modern life is not that people have no narratives. It's that they increasingly expect narrative to overrule reality. And when reality refuses, they experience the refusal as oppression. This is why correction now feels like hatred to so many people. A correction tells the truth about a boundary. It says, no, that's not true. That's not so. It says, this does not produce what you claim it produces. It says, your intention does not erase the outcome. It says, your feeling does not alter the structure of the thing. It says, your story is not strong enough to carry the weight of what is real. That kind of correction feels cruel to a person whose identity depends on the narrative remaining intact. But correction is not cruelty. Correction is mercy before judgment. The body warns before the diagnosis. The marriage warns before the divorce. The child warns before the estrangement. The money warns before the collapse. The culture warns before the ruin. Even nations are corrected before they are conquered. They are corrected by debt, decadence, cowardice, corruption, birth rates, trust crime, education, family breakdown, spiritual exhaustion, and the slow disappearance of people willing to tell the truth when lying would be profitable. That's what it comes down to. The disappearance of those people willing to tell the truth when it is more profitable to lie. The warning is not the enemy. The warning is the chance. A culture trained to despise correction will mistake every warning for an attack. It will shoot the messenger, flatter the patient, medicate the symptom, rename the disease, and then act shocked when the funeral arrives. This is not wisdom, it's the politics of unreality. And unreality always comes with a bill. And that's why competence matters so much. Competence is not merely the ability to do a task well. Competence is the result of having submitted to reality often enough that your ego no longer gets the final voice. The competent person has been corrected by material, seasons, tools, children, animals, deadlines, injuries, bills, failures, and consequences. He has had to learn that reality is not impressed by his preferred self-image. A man who builds something learns this. The board is either cut straight or it isn't. A man who grows something learns this. The plant either responds or it does not. A man who coaches learns this. The athlete either develops or does not. A man who raises children learns this, if he is humble enough to notice. His lectures matter less than his example. His intentions matter less than his presence. His authority matters less than whether his life is worthy of trust. Competence trains a person to respect what is outside his control. That respect is one of the first conditions of sanity. The incompetent person is not simply the person who lacks skill. Everyone lacks skill at some point. The deeper incompetence is the refusal to be taught by consequences. It is the man who wants the title without the discipline, the outcome without the process, the authority without the burden, the harvest without season, the applause without the work. This kind of incompetence is everywhere now, and it has political consequences. I call it the post-COVID age of incompetence. When a population loses contact with the disciplines that make reality unavoidable, it becomes vulnerable to a fantasy at scale. People who have never had to make anything work become very confident about redesigning everything. People who cannot govern their own impulses speak casually about governing entire societies. People who cannot keep promises in private demand vast systems of public trust. People who have never built a durable life become experts in remaking civilization. This is how abstraction becomes dangerous. An abstract person can speak beautifully about humanity while being cruel to actual people. He can love justice while despising the neighbor who inconveniences him. He can defend the poor while refusing generosity in his own household. He can celebrate freedom while being enslaved to his appetites. He can denounce corruption while lying to himself every morning. The abstraction protects him. Actual reality would correct him. That is why ordinary life matters, not because ordinary life is small, because it's where reality has the most access to us. A man can hide inside of his political opinions for years. He can hide inside theories, movements, platforms, identities, and enemies, but it is much harder to hide from the people who live with him, the work he has neglected, the habits he doesn't give up, the promises he breaks, and the consequences that keep arriving with his name on them. Ordinary life is the greatest enemy of the false self. This may be why so many people flee into public outrage. Public outrage allows a man to feel morally alive without becoming personally honest. It gives him stimulation without repentance. It gives him enemies without confession. It gives him a stage on which his anger can feel like virtue. But anger is not the same as vision. Anger can wake a man up, but it cannot be trusted to lead him for long. Anger simplifies. It sharpens the edges of the world. It makes everything vivid and urgent. In small doses, rightly ordered, anger can defend what love refuses to surrender. But when anger becomes the master of perception, it begins selecting evidence, assigning motives, and excusing cruelty. Then anger becomes just another narrative, and reality is not interested in that narrative either. The truthful person must therefore become correctable. That is the word I need to sit with, correctable. Not gullible, not spineless, not endlessly apologetic, not a man without conviction. A correctable person may have strong beliefs, but he does not treat his current understanding as sacred. That's me yawning. He can be interrupted by evidence. He can be humbled by consequences. He can admit when his argument has outrun his own knowledge. He can revise a conclusion without feeling his identity has been murdered. That kind of person is rare because correction feels like the death of the ego, death to the ego. But it is not death. It's pruning. And before anyone gets too poetic about that, pruning still involves a blade. Correction cuts away the part of a man that was growing in the wrong direction. It removes the branch that was stealing his strength. It looks violent only to the part of the plant that believed every inch of growth was sacred. But not all growth is health. Some growth is disorder. Some expansion is disease. Some confidence is swelling. And some certainty is infection. A correctable man understands this, or at least begins to. He learns to ask different questions, not how do I defend myself, but what is this showing me? Not how do I keep the story intact, but what if the story is the problem? Not who can I blame, but what part of this belongs to me? Not how do I avoid humiliation, but what truth? Is there a typo there? What part of this belongs to me? Not how do I avoid humiliation, but what truth is humiliation trying to teach me? Oh, what is the truth that humiliation is trying to teach me? Those questions do not make life easy. They make deception harder. And that is the point. The purpose of Eyes to See is not to create a new class of people who are certain in a more fashionable way. The world already has enough people who have mistaken suspicion for wisdom and outrage for courage. The purpose is not to distrust everything. I'm tired. Got up early today. Too early. Oh, shoot. The world already has enough people who have mistaken suspicion for wisdom and outrage for courage. The purpose is not to distrust everything. Distrust can become its own blindness. A cynical man can reject every official narrative and still be ruled by falsehood if the falsehood flatters him from the opposite direction. The goal isn't paranoia. The goal is truthful perception. Truthful perception requires more than just information. It requires formation. A person has to be formed into someone who can endure truth when it stops being useful to his argument. He has to become the sort of person who does not need every fact to flatter him, every correction to spare him, every conversation to protect his pride, and every political framework to keep him innocent. That is the unpopular implication. But people who will not obey reality privately will eventually demand leaders who help them deny it publicly. Keep clipping those. Those are the good ones. Let me double check. We got some comments and I overlooked them because that's what we do on these shows is I read the paper that I write and then when I'm done I check the comments. But I'm almost done and I jump the gun and check the comments. Old Piff is back. And I am reading essay number 7 that I've written for my show, Eyes to See, Vision Beyond Narrative. And I don't know where I was, though. That is the unpopular. The people who will not obey reality privately will eventually demand leaders who help them deny it publicly. That's right. Clip that. And once that happens, politics becomes theater for the uncorrectable souls. Every side casts itself as a victim, savior, prophet, and judge. Every failure is explained away. Every contradiction is absorbed. Every consequence is blamed on an enemy. Every warning is dismissed as hatred. Every limit is treated as oppression. The whole society becomes a courtroom where no one is guilty, and everyone is suing reality for emotional damages. But reality does not attend that trial. It simply waits outside with the actual verdict. That verdict may be delayed, but it is not canceled. Reality is patient because reality does not need to win an argument. It does not need a trend. It does not need a platform. It does not need applause. It does not need views. It does not need permission from the educated, the offended, the powerful, the wounded, the resentful, or the impressive. It simply remains what it is. Truth is that which is. And a lie is whatever demands that reality bow before the story. I'll say that again differently. And a lie is whatever demands that reality bow before the story. So the question is not whether we have a narrative. We all do. The question is whether our narrative is obedient to reality or whether it's trying to replace it. Also called the correspondence theory of reality. Do your beliefs correspond with reality? Truth is lies. That question must be asked politically, yes. It must be asked of parties, institutions, media systems, ideologies, experts, movements, and leaders, but it must first be asked in the places where we are most tempted to lie because the lie still feels useful. What is your body telling you that your mouth keeps explaining away? What is your home revealing that your pride keeps refusing to name? What is your calendar confessing about your actual worship? What is your bank account saying about your actual appetites? What are your children learning from your repeated example that your lectures cannot undo? What has your wife or husband been saying for years that you have dismissed because receiving it would cost you the luxury of innocence? What unfinished work keeps testifying against the grand story you tell about your ambition? Those are not small questions. They are political questions before politics. Because the person formed by those evasions does not disappear when he enters the public life. He brings his evasions with him. He votes with them. He argues with them. He joins movements with them. He selects leaders with them. He calls them principles when they have only ever been appetites wearing a suit. This is why the work of seeing clearly must begin beneath one's opinion. It begins with correction. It begins with the willingness to say that is true and I did not want it to be true. It begins with the humility to let reality have the first word before narrative begins its defense. It begins when a man stops treating every accusation as an enemy and starts asking whether it might be a mercy arriving early. A truthful society cannot be built out of uncorrectable people. It cannot be built out of citizens who would demand accountability from everyone else but themselves. It cannot be built out of men who want to expose without confess, courage without obedience, justice without restraint, and truth without humiliation. No amount of information will solve that. Last page. No election will solve that. No commentator will solve that. No hidden document will solve that. The work is older, harder, and closer than that. It's the work of becoming the kind of person that can be told the truth without immediately reaching for a weapon, an excuse, a slogan, pointing the finger at a villain, or even a finely crafted narrative. Reality is not interested in your narrative. And that may sound cruel at first, but it may be one of the kindest facts in the world, TBH, Because if reality could be bent permanently by our stories, then the proud would never be humbled. The addict would never be interrupted. The coward would never be exposed. The liar would never be caught. The fool would never be corrected. And the blind man would never discover that he was blind. The mercy of reality is that it refuses to become whatever we need it to be in order to remain unchanged. It stands there, immovable and impolite, telling the truth. And the man who could finally stop arguing with it may not become wise all at once. He may not suddenly see everything clearly. He may not escape deception entirely. None of us do. But he may become correctable. And a correctable man is no small thing. He is harder to flatter, harder to herd, harder to purchase, harder to frighten with imaginary enemies, harder to seduce with stories that preserve his innocence, harder to govern through the appetites he has finally begun to name. That may be where real vision begins. Not with the man who knows everything, but with the man who can still be corrected by what is. The end. No new comments. 2 viewers. One of them's on Twitch, I assume, so that one doesn't count because it's a bot. So again, we are here on a Thursday evening. I did get a late start. I wanted to do 11 o'clock, but I got a little occupied with some things, and we started 11:55. But going forward, every Thursday, we're trying to do Eyes to See. This is the show where we discuss topics like this. Now, if you want to summarize that paper in a paragraph, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. Actually, you're not going to, so I'll just do it myself. Reality is not interested in your narrative. Reality will come and slap you in the face. To be an uncorrectable man means to basically live blindly. However, if you would like your beliefs and personhood to correspond with reality, you must be correctable. So here I am accusing the world of that which I am. I mean, basically, it's not hard to write these when you start looking at yourself with a mirror or a microscope. And then when you get to my age of 40, 50, whatever, one can, if you'd like, look back and see the lives of those around you, the lives of those ahead of you, the lives of those who came before you. And a certain pattern emerges. And you start to see the correlation between people who are real and a certain quality of life. I would argue those people are operating under the gravitational force of reality. You can tell yourself, I deserve to live to an old age. I deserve to have kids and grandkids. And then go to the doctor and he says, no, you're going to die in 6 months of cancer. And that's reality. It doesn't matter what you tell yourself about the future. reality comes knocking one way or another. So I don't know if we need to examine in essay number 8, the next one. How are we going to do this? Because we figured out you know what I do in the next one? I think I'm going to go back through the different essays and start tying everything together. I mean, they kind of go from one to another, but what was the goal of this show? We can go back to essay number 1. As a matter of fact, let me read the first paragraph. It might be good. I got to go, though, because I'm about to fall asleep. But okay, where is that sucker? Eyes to see, finished essays, number 1. Essay number 1, eyes to see. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Quote, welcome to Eyes to See, vision beyond the narrative. This is a show about politics and current events, but at its core, it's a show more about power and perception, persuasion and deception, the pursuit of truth and the resistance to lies. This is because the defining feature of the modern world isn't chaos or ignorance. It's managed blindness. We live inside systems that do not rely on force alone. They rely on persuasion, on convincing people that what is false is normal, what is harmful is necessary, and what is evil is either imaginary or justified. Deception reigns not because people are stupid, but because it works. And so on and so forth. I'll come in hot next week. Next Thursday. In the meantime, I think I'm going to take Sundays off. Gotta have a day of rest, you know. So tomorrow is Friday. We're going to do a grow show. Saturday, do a grow show. Sunday off. Monday, grow show. Tuesday, grow show. Wednesday, grow show. Thursday, eyes to see. That's what we're going forward with. And then on the last day of the month, May 31st, which is when? It is either the Memorial Day or the day or two after. No, Memorial Day is the 25th. It is one full week after. Yeah, so the 31st is a Sunday anyway. Can't stop yawning. Yeah, so the 30th is a Saturday. That 30th will be the On Faith and Doubt, and we're going to go deep on that one. We're going to conjure up the last 4. Oh, wow, my first essay was 4 pages. These new ones are 12, 13. Not single type. I actually changed the spacing. I operate on 1.5 speed. It's easier to read. Or 1.5 spacing. So that means that every 2 pages becomes 3. So divide by 3, multiply times 2. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Divided by times 2 is 8. So it's actually an 8-page paper that read as 12. I think I need to start keeping them around 5 to 7. Not 6, 7, but 5 to 7. All right, I got to get going because I'm literally about to pass out. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the comments, Piff. See you tomorrow if we want to talk growing. We'll do it at 11 p.m. unless I'm late. Then just keep an eye on the thumbnail will say it would say scheduled at 11. That's what it should say now. But then if I change it, it's like 10:45 and I'm like, I'm not ready. I change it to 11:30. It shows up there. They do adjust that. Hey, we got one viewer saying thanks. Well, Just teasing. Okay, thank you. We did 45 minutes, and you're welcome to come back and talk some more shit next time. Good night, everyone.